What's up, guys? Max here with another episode of the ScuttleButt Show, and I am here today with Aaron Vanderbeck, who is a United States Marine and has a very interesting story to tell, unlike anything we've done on this show before. Aaron, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you today?
Excellent. So we were just chatting a little bit before we launched the show here, and what you're about to step off to go across America on a bike, and there's a really powerful and important purpose behind that. Do you want to kind of just walk us through a little bit about what you're doing, and then we can go from there?
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, thanks for having me on here. So on May 26th, on Tuesday, I'll be, starting my bicycle trip. It's 2,700 miles from Oceanside, California to Wilmington, North Carolina. And the purpose behind it is to, it's threefold, but primarily it's to raise, national level awareness for three friends of mine, three service members, 2 Marines and a sailor that are being charged with a crime they didn't commit, that they're being attacked basically by the command that they've served for, honorably for decades now. And up until this point, the case hasn't got the attention that it needs. I won't say it hasn't got the attention it deserves, but there's been several people that have supported them from the beginning and their families, but it's been going on for a year and a half, and nothing's really had any momentum built. So doing what I know I can do and just doing my best to help facilitate getting that attention out there to the public and to the facts of the case.
And we before we get too into what's going on here specifically, can you give us a little background on yourself? Tell us about yourself a little bit.
Yeah, so like you said, I'm a prior Marine. I did 9 years, just over 9 years. Joined in 2007 as a 0351 infantry assaultman. Shortly after I graduated that, I actually got picked up to go through selection for MARSOC. So I went through selection as a PFC, got selected, and once I went through the training, I spent all my time on the teams until I got out in 2016. I did a little bit of time on the East Coast, most of my time on the West Coast. Been out for just over 4 years, and when I'm not doing all the other things I do, the community, means the world to me, the brotherhood, regardless of the background. And, obviously feel the desire to represent our guys well. That makes sense. So.
Yeah. So you were a Raider, Marine Raider, and that's a pretty new thing relative to in military history. MARSOC is a relatively new command, and has grown a lot over the years that they have been around. Thank you for your service with MARSOC and in the Marine Corps. Did you do deployments over there?
Yeah, I did 5 altogether, two combat deployments to Afghanistan. In 2011, I was fragged by an RPG, so I got medevaced on that time. My first deployment was to Yemen, doing counter-terrorist type stuff, and then 2 to Southeast Asia, which were my last 2. So fair little bit. I mean, it was a good time.
Yeah.
Definitely got the broad spectrum of events. So
sure. Oh wow, I didn't realize. So you were wounded in Afghanistan. Okay, so that's pretty intense. And then did you fly out? Did you go to launch duel, all that?
Yeah, so we were in the Helmand, so I went from Helmand to some forward operating base, and then there to Bagram to launch duel to New Jersey to Balboa. And it wasn't like a life-threatening thing. It just took some frag on the right side. It fractured my elbow. Obviously broke the skin and everything else, but I couldn't really, needed surgery to use my arm. It wasn't that intense, but my wife would say otherwise, but it's life.
Well, people are pretty humble about their battlefield wounds. You see guys with they're missing a limb and they're like, it's not really such a big deal. I guess when people tend to put it in perspective of I'm still here, I'm still alive. there's way worse things that could have happened. But you know, I think that's a pretty big deal, pretty courageous of you, and I got a lot of respect for you and anybody who's fighting overseas in Afghanistan, Iraq, and who's been, you know, basically, I guess anybody who's been a Purple Heart recipient, it's a big deal. So thank you.
Thank you. I had a lot of good teammates, a lot of good mentors. So kept me, not that I, you know, it was life threatening that I needed to stay alive, but they kept me alive in the sense of training and everything else that kicks in and just taking care of me, you know. So I owe a lot of that to them, or all of that, I should say, to them. So
yeah. Well,
yeah,
you can.
Cool.
It's obvious talking to you, kind of illustrating how close knit of a team life that, you know, you're a part of, the family that you're a part of when you're in special operations, when you're a Raider, and what you're doing now is, you know, and what you've been doing for the past few years is kind of standing up and advocating for that community, because you did a couple ruck marches to remember some fallen and some aviation mishaps, and which is horrible. I think we've all lost, you know, if you've been in the military long enough, you've probably, unfortunately, you know, lost someone in a helo crash or a plane crash, or a, you know, fast rope incident. It's just inherently very dangerous stuff. And this Memorial Day, I'll be honoring some friends who I've lost in some crashes, and, you know, it's just horrible. And I'm sorry that you've experienced that as well. But you and some other people did some ruck marches to honor the fallen. Is that right? Yep.
Yeah. So in 2015, March 10th, Black Hawk helicopter crash, Navarre Beach, Florida's Mojo 69. But it killed, you know, 7 Raiders and 4 National Guard soldiers. So, you know, another Raider organized that march to honor them. We you know, carried a paddleback that was recovered at the crash site, 770 miles, you know, from Florida to North Carolina. And again, just thankful to be able to be a part of that, and to have my legs, you know, and to honor them and show your support for the families. And you know, there's one thing to show your support, I guess, and there's another thing to actually walk with them through life. And there's a lot of guys that have stepped up and have chosen to walk with them through their hardship, you know. And that was coming from the communities we come from. That's a really small thing I consider a small thing to put a ruck on, right? That should be expected, you know. That should be the norm. Is it? Unfortunately, no. But I attribute that a lot to the caliber of men that raised me, you know, in the Marine Corps, in the community, and obviously life too, and just situations growing up and stuff. But and then again, there was unfortunately a similar event happened. The C-130 crashed in Mississippi a couple of years later and killed 15 was the total, so 14 Marines and a sailor. And same thing, it was just kind of like, well, we can't not honor them as well. So we marched, you know, again, it was organized by a Raider, and just had the opportunity to be part of that too, you know. And I consider that an honor to be able to carry our teammates' names, their stories. And that was kind of the big push behind that too, was a name's a name, but you don't actually know the person behind that name, right? Until you spend time with them, until you share their stories. And having the opportunity to go across small town America and share the stories of our brothers, to share stories of their, you know, the things that make them tick, the things that made them get up in the morning, you know, the things they enjoy doing, whether it was super short silkies or listening to death metal, whatever it was, you know. So, and having a chance to, you know, I think it's important that the community, there can definitely be an alienation between communities where it's like, oh, you're in the military and you're the civilian world, right? But we're all people, you know. And I think it's important that we allow, just as much as the civilian world, quote unquote, needs to allow the military to, you know, that culture to have freedom of space to live and not be judged. It goes both ways. we need to open up to the civilian communities and say, hey, this is how you can help and be involved. And there's a lot of value in that because, again, all these small towns are able to come out and actually hear their stories, be part of what's going on, show support. And that's kind of my goal with this ride too, is hit all these, stops along the way, small town America, as I ride through and share the story, right? We're people that thrive off of stories. That's how civilization began, was we sat around the fire and shared stories of great granddad. Only now it's current events, and I take that a step farther. Just if we don't repeat our lineage to one another, whether it's in our communities or whatever else, then we don't have anything to fall back on, right? If I'm not sharing the stories of, hey, this dude helped mold me into who I am, or this is the cut of fabric that you come from as a community, right? And I consider, Raider, Recon, Sniper, that whole soft, and then outside of that community, like it should be your men of action, your men of honor, your men of humility, your men that are willing to go the extra mile, right? But if we're not demonstrating that, number one, and then instilling that back into each other and sharing those stories of the guys that went before us in Mac v. SOG or, World War II or wherever else, then we're nothing, right? And I think that's kind of, part of me thinks that's how we get to where we're at today, is where we don't have modern day examples as a whole, as a rule, of men and women that are standing in the gap for the general injustices. There are men and women that do that, but even then, I speak from experience, it can be diluted. It's like, oh, I'm going to stand for what's right, but also it makes me feel good, right? And matters of right and wrong aren't matters of how personal feelings. It's a matter of righteousness or evil, right and wrong. And how we get into this case now too, it's if you look at the facts and if you read all the narratives and if you understand the details, it's a clear-cut matter of right and wrong, to the point where they've been, and I'm probably going to mess up the term, but basically they've been acquitted at a lower level military judicial court. But the insanity of it is that the convening authority, which is in this case General Yu, still continues to take it up a notch. And I don't know why, whether that's to prove a point, whatever else, I won't speculate. But at the end of the day, again, it's a matter of, well, this is right. They didn't do the things they've been accused of. What's happened to them since then, being labeled criminals, being treated as such without due process, it's a matter of right and wrong at the end of the day. So, and at the end of the day, we look ourselves in the mirror. You're going to have to answer for your actions, just like I am. So, but
yeah. So, I think you hit on a lot of good stuff there about how we as a community of veterans can boost each other up. We got to check each other and we got to make sure we're doing the right things, so that way our lives are successful after we get out of the military, as well as supporting those who are still in and making sure that their lives are successful after they get out of the military. And those things that make you be able to look yourself in the mirror, hold your head up high when you walk around, feel good. Hopefully at the end of life that your life was meaningful and purposeful and that you did the right things and you're proud of it. And you've been not only talking to talk, but walking to walk, which is, there's a lot of talking to talk. And then it's another thing when you have to put your money where your mouth is, so to speak, and do the difficult things, which you're getting ready to do here in a couple of days. Another difficult thing. You might say it's easy compared to what somebody else is going through, but it's not easy to do something like this, to coordinate it, to actually do it. It's a big undertaking and it's for a good cause, which that cause is, pardon me, I'm going to reference a note here real quick that I have so I get everything right. But in, the names of those who are being charged: Gunnery Sergeant Joshua Negron, Gunnery Sergeant Daniel Dreyer, and Chief Petty Officer Eric Gilmet are basically being potentially court-martialed for manslaughter. But it's not nearly as simple as that by a long shot. Do you want to kind of walk us through what is going on, starting with inside the inciting event?
Yeah, so walk you through the event and how it happened. And again, all this can be referenced at uap.org. There's much more concise and clear, detailed information out there. But I'll give you my narrative, as far as, and I'll try to make it short. So these three went out on New Year's Eve in Iraq. They had authorization to, they were approved to, there was nothing unlawful about it. And they went to a local establishment, get some food, hang out. And this civilian contractor, who was a former Green Beret, decided he wanted to pick a fight for whatever reason. And I'm not going to speculate in any of that as well. But what I do know from the case, from firsthand eyewitness accounts and from video feed, is that this contractor continued to try to instigate a fight to the point where he was removed from the establishment. But then he goes on to wait outside. Basically, I don't want to say ambush, but hey, I'm going to wait here. We've all seen it done. I'm going to wait until these guys leave, and I'm going to have it out with them. To which point, again, the local people that work there told Danny, Josh, and Eric, like, hey, this guy's waiting outside. They're like, cool, we'll just let it diffuse. We'll let the situation kind of go away, which one would hope and expect. But it didn't. They were still waiting out there when they left. And all these guys are senior operators. They're not junior Marines, junior sailors. They've been around. They've multiple deployments. They have the requisite experience. And so, Danny, being the senior leader and good, leader that he is, he tried to go to diffuse the situation, say, hey, I don't understand what's going on, but let's talk this out. Like, we don't have anything against you, right? To which point this contractor, who's severely drunk, very inebriated, attacked him. And there's the video that corresponds to all this. He pushes Dan. Dan doesn't respond. Hits him again. He doesn't respond, and then he swings. At which point Josh steps in and delivers one punch, knocks the guy out. There's no beating. There's no attacking. It's just the required amount of force to stop the assault on Danny, basically. At which point, to point out that the contractors that were with this guy leave him for the most part. They leave him in the middle of a street in Iraq. So what do these three do? They help him, and they get him back, and they give him medical care, and they make sure he's okay. Unfortunately, because of how much he had consumed in alcohol, he started to asphyxiate. He started to choke on his vomit, and so they had to medevac him out of country, to which he died 4 days later. Nothing conclusive to, again, them doing anything wrong, right? It could, and the line that I like to use, and it's been thrown, is it could have happened to any one of us. It could have happened to any single one of us, even to this day. We've all been in those situations where, all it takes is one hit, but that doesn't justify them being labeled as murderers. And that's where the issue comes in, is that before any facts were collected, before any of the narrative was consolidated and put out there, they were immediately branded as murderers by the command. They were almost immediately had their security clearances revoked, their special duty pays removed. So you're putting the families in financial hardship. You're affecting their ability to work at the command anymore. They can't, because they don't have the clearance, before anything's even put out there. And what I come to understand is that, the general in this case said something specifically to the family, like, we're going to hold the murderers accountable. So you're painting the narrative of the family that your husband was murdered. It's a terrible thing that he passed away. No one's celebrating that. It's very sad, and my heart breaks for that family, right? That no one wants to lose a loved one. But that doesn't mean that they should be held accountable for something they didn't do, and they should have their livelihoods completely destroyed because of, whatever careerism or bureaucracy or, the insanity of, I can't understand, of this, general that wants to put his flag down for whatever reason on this hill. So I hope that does a decent job at kind of going factually through the events and kind of where we're at now in a way.
Yeah, it does. And I've seen even it's probably worth noting from what I've read, I've seen even more. I don't know if it's anecdotal or if there's evidence to support this, that they brought him back on base. They got him in Iraq. They posted a watch to make sure that he made it through the night, knowing that he was drunk and potentially hit his head. And then as soon as he was in duress, they alerted for help. So if he was left alone, he would have never made it to a higher level of care. So their actions gave him the best chance for surviving after what originally happened, which is a fluke, a freak accident of the fact that he fell and hit his head, and that compounded whatever inebriation, whatever his blood alcohol content was, that would have made it hard to deal with then, like maybe a minor concussion or something like that. I can see how it's obvious how these things could compound into a worse situation, right? But it seems like they took, I haven't seen the video, I haven't been able to find it online, but if the video shows what it's said to show, then it's obvious that they acted reasonably, right? Like in the court of law, there's the reasonable person argument, right? Would a reasonable person have done this thing, and it seems to meet all those standards. And then they're being charged with manslaughter, which I guess, so forget about this case. I'll use another reference. Downtown San Diego, a doorman was out with some friends on like industry night or something like that. He got hit in the face. He was punched in the face. He fell. He hit his head. He died from hitting his head. The guy who hit him, who was the aggressor, was charged with manslaughter. I feel like in that situation, that's the appropriate charge. It's not murder. It's manslaughter. So, but that's not what we're talking about here. So now let's go back to these guys. They're being charged, from what I've read, with manslaughter. But they should be not getting charged with anything because it's self-defense. From what all the evidence seems to state, and then that their actions back up that evidence. But, the first thing that comes to mind, we'll get to talking about General Yu and why potentially the Marine Corps would pursue this type of action or take those steps. I'm curious. I'd like to talk about it. The guy who was killed, was his name Alex Rodriguez? Is that right?
I believe so. I know Rodriguez was his last name.
Let me just look to make sure so I get the names right. Rick Rodriguez. So the guy's name was Rick Rodriguez. I want to get that. I don't want to disrespect him. So his name was Rick Rodriguez. He's the guy who died. Does his family even want this course of action? Has that come up? Like, because you're only just ruining more lives by pursuing this type of thing. And I've always thought, like, philosophically, guilt should be decided by a jury. Punishment should be decided by a family or a victim, because there's so many families who would not want to see more lives ruined in an event like this. Do you know anything about that? Do you know what their stance is?
I don't.
I'd be curious to know. I mean, it just seems like so unreasonable to think that they would want, like, I know I'm speculating now, but it just seems unreasonable to think that people would seek out that kind of revenge justice, And
I think that's, again, I don't want to speculate, but from my understanding of the case, they had and I don't understand the judicial and military system all that well, because thankfully I was never part of it. But you have your Article 15 hearing, you have your Article 32 hearing, and then you have your court-martial. At both of those lower levels, they were acquitted. They were cleared. That's
already happened. That process has already happened.
Yes. Yeah. The issue, again, as I've come to understand it, is that the family was there for either one or both of those proceedings, and they were not given the full details of what happened. The MARSOC command painted to them the picture that their husband, father, was murdered, which he wasn't. So they're finding this out in a court proceeding. Oh, these guys did act accordingly. They were acting reasonably. They were acting in self-defense. They were not maliciously attacking anyone. It's the complete opposite. And so to answer your question, as far as the reaction, I do not know. But logically, I would like to take that to the next level where, I'd be hurt. Well, the MARSOC command just lied to me, led me to believe that someone was going to be held accountable. And now I'm understanding that's not the fact, but the absurdity of it again is that the command has not just been tight-lipped and said nothing. They have gone after character witnesses for men that have wanted to or tried to speak up in defense of the character of Josh, Danny, and Eric. They all have, they're all by our definition in the military of honorable service, more than honorable service, outstanding. And to be at the level of operations, it's not like, again, I don't want to, make this sound derogatory, but it's not like they're just coming from the fleet. They have multiple special operations combat deployments, multiple deployments outside of that realm, that aren't combat, that take a requisite amount of character and understanding and finesse. So it's not like something they just jumped into. And to go back to what you said about the family, the absurdity to me lies in the command that here they have been, and I don't know if this is the correct term still, but acquitted. They were found to be reasonable and just in their actions and in self-defense. But General Yu has still chosen to make this the hill that he dies upon, and says, well, that's too bad. I'm going to take it to a court-martial. And not just that, I'm going to threaten witnesses. I'm going to intimidate witnesses. I'm going to wield the influence I have as a general in this command to silence operators, to silence people. That's really what it comes down to and needs to be addressed publicly, because at the end of the day, the military serves the people. It exists to defend the population. And if the people in leadership are not holding true to their oaths, if they're not, if they're men of words and not men of character, then this is how we find ourselves in these situations. And I'm a very small person. I don't, claim to understand how people get to positions of power. I have my ideas, but and my theories. But at the end of the day, we as the people, whether you're in the military or as outside, need to make our voices heard and say, hey, this is unacceptable behavior for anyone. You wouldn't expect that, or you'd say something if that was, someone at school in a position of authority doing something to your child. You would say something if it was a local law enforcement agency or whatever else. Well, here we have not just the military, but strategic operational levels of special operations military, and no one's saying anything. No one's doing anything. And the real travesty at the end of the day is that no one will be held accountable, or potentially no one could be held accountable for the damage they already have done. At the very least, an apology. Hey, I messed up. And that's what any humble man, woman, operator, whatever you are, should do. I make mistakes. I'll be the first one to say that. I've made plenty of them. And my pride says, don't say sorry. Don't apologize. I mean, parenting, perfect example. I do something wrong to the kid. I say the wrong thing. I could very easily be like, well, I'm the dad. I'm putting my foot down. I'm not apologizing. No, but that's teaching them the wrong way to handle things. And as a father, and you can apply this anywhere, I need to humble myself, admit that I made a mistake, ask for forgiveness, and then move on with life. Because it's not just about me. It's not just about you. It's about the people you're influencing. It's about the baseline that you're establishing for, hey, this is acceptable or unacceptable behavior, So over to you.
It's, well, I love all that. I think, I don't think you're a small person, metaphorically, what you're doing has obvious, you've got to know what you're doing is impactful. I hope that, I believe it is. The goal. That's the goal, right? So, you're to advocate for the truth. And that's we were talking a little bit before we started. That's the bullshit about, about bureaucracy, is the people who are making these decisions are never made to answer the compelling questions, which is why. The question would be, why are you pursuing this course of action? And then the answer would probably be some horseshit for justice, but that doesn't mean anything. If you just say for justice, it doesn't mean anything. Of justice for what crime? You know, like what exactly happened here that you need to punish? And, you know, as I thought about this yesterday, getting ready for this, I couldn't help but think of the other high profile cases that I would categorize in the same field, because it's just special operations command members being accused or tried of murder, manslaughter, or some kind of egregious criminal act. We had Eddie Gallagher last year. There are the SEALs in Africa who killed the Green Beret, or they're being charged with killing a Green Beret. There's these guys. There's cases of soldiers who were recently pardoned and released from Leavenworth by the president, and it just my fear is, in an attempt to establish a new reputation, they would throw the book at guys for no reason, just so that then they can say, well, look what we did. We did put people away. We do take it seriously, but it's all just a ruse to save face or create a perception of something, a change of climate at the expense of someone's life. I can't help but think that, and I don't know where that pressure would come from to make a decision like that politically or career-wise from General Yu. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I have lots of thoughts on that, but you know, you kind of touched on a lot of different points there, and to answer your question shortly, I will not touch on what I believe as far as the political, bureaucratic, deeper purposes behind, you know, why these people do what they do.
Sure.
Right. What I would like to kind of latch onto is the fact that, you know, in all those cases you mentioned, none of us are, it's not clear cut, right? Like none of us are perfect, right? It's not like, you know, and forgive me for not understanding all the ins and outs of a lot of these cases, because I, you know, partially I do try to insulate from a lot of just the junk out there, unless it's something that I can personally help and affect. But you know, I just, in reference to you know, Chief Gallagher, he never claimed to be a perfect operator, but neither are the guys that are pressing charges and crying wolf and doing all these other things too, you know? And so it's never just a matter of, oh, this guy's clean and this guy's not clean. No, we're all dirty, you know, and you need to come to that understanding in a sense, but own up to it. And I think that's where the honor lies, is like, hey, like, what do we consider a punishable offense? Like if a guy goes out and drinks a few beers because he's been in combat and he has a rough night, and you know, someone picks a fight with him, like, we ruin people's careers over that. Well, guess what? Like America, like we're not plaster saints. And I tell this to people, you know, soft, recon, sniper, Green Berets, et cetera, we are in a lot of ways the thermometer to the culture of America, because we have on one side of the spectrum, oh, you're the tip of the spear, and America expects all these great things from you. We expect to be operational, ready to go at a moment's notice, laser precision, et cetera. But when something happens that attracts negative attention or negative spotlight, we condemn those guys, right? But what it really is, what it's really demonstrating is the culture in America that we've allowed to insinuate and grow and fester within our entire culture, right? Again, these generals, these and not just generals, you know, there's a whole, it happens the enlisted side too, but people don't get into those positions of leadership overnight. There is a trend. There is an identifiable, if at a very minimum, you know, this just doesn't feel right, right? Like there's just something about that guy. And I'm not saying that we obviously dictate things by our feelings, but our definition of leadership in my book up front is sacrifice, right? You are not put in a position of leadership to serve yourself. You are there to serve your community, your family, your men, et cetera, et cetera. And giving, you know, in the case of the military, you're giving them the best possible ability to come back alive. And it wasn't just with General Yu. This has happened repeatedly. It's happened in all of our communities. And I'm gonna open up something right now, which I probably don't want to open up, but I'm just gonna go there because it applies to the situation. Lieutenant Colonel Travis Homiak, who was or is the current schoolhouse CO for MARSOC, right? And if you look at his history within the reconnaissance community, 3rd Recon Battalion specifically, and how he wielded unlawful command influence and how he left men out to hang in Afghanistan and how he endangered their lives, and I believe in the end ultimately got men killed, was never held accountable for that. And now he's in a position of authority where he directly affects who's getting selected or not selected for special operations continuation of training. And so, and this is firsthand account from me personally of men that I know that have said, hey, this guy does not meet the standard. He has failed the standard several times on multiple occasions. And from his mouth, push him through. We're meeting numbers. And that's acceptable. But again, I don't want to focus on that. What I want to get back to is that it's a trend, and it's that accountability, and it doesn't just happen overnight. But the change, I believe, happens when we address it in ourselves first. You know, I need to address, because I'm just as capable of injustice. I'm just as capable of making decisions based off of my own comfort level or whatever else as anyone. You know, and it's a war. It's a whole nother battle that you're fighting. Am I going to do the right thing even if it costs me, or am I going to do the wrong thing because it makes me more comfortable or helps my family, or, you know, makes this person look better? And as a community, I think we need to stop and ask ourselves that on a daily basis. I need to ask myself that when I go to the grocery store, when I ride a bike, when I'm putting my kid on, when I'm loading rounds, like, why am I doing what I'm doing, and what's the status of my heart? I'm not saying I did that by any means. Like, you know, I've got my own fair share of stories, like we all do. But by God's grace, I say that I'm here today, you know, and I certainly want to use that grace that I've been given to help those that need it, you know.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, because we live in a culture where, for one, most people shouldn't be concerned with the intricacies of what happens with military on deployment, especially in the post 9/11 generation of special operations who've worked harder than ever in the history, because you've got guys for 20 years straight have been deploying in the war on terror with no end in sight, in a war that relied almost exclusively on special operations to fight it in Afghanistan in the beginning, throughout the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the war against ISIS has been exclusively basically special operations. And so there's a saying, and then I want to get back to the specifics of what we're here to talk about, and I want to be respectful of your time, but I think it's just worth noting that there's an expression of never meet your heroes. Are you familiar? Have you heard that? Never meet your heroes. Well, people say never meet your heroes, right? You'll be let down when you meet them in real life because they'll never live up to your expectations. But you know what? Fuck that. You should meet your heroes and know that they have flaws. You know, the idea that your heroes are perfect and that you have to live up to the perfect standard is such bullshit. Instead, it should be your heroes are your heroes in spite of their flaws. Even with their flaws, they've risen to this level that you admire them for, and that that the standard that you hold them up to, in spite of all the things that are wrong with them, just like with everybody else in the world. Just this idea that only perfect people can be capable of doing anything anymore, and one little flaw in your history and you're done for the rest of your life, and we need to blast you for it and destroy your career, your life, across all walks of life, not just military I'm talking about now, is so psycho and pathetic, and people need to fucking grow up and realize that your heroes have flaws, as they should, but they overcome them. That's the whole point, you know? It's just it's crazy to me that that's what we pretend like everyone has to be perfect.
And just to tag onto that, if we don't realize that and grow up, like you just said, we destroy ourselves.
Yep.
Like we're digging our own grave. We're sealing our own fate in history as a civilization, as people, you know, and I have a lot more deeper thoughts on that, but that's the truth. You either learn from that and grow up, and we see it playing out before our eyes. In this case, and in our culture, you know, we're destroying ourselves from the inside, which I don't know all the quotes. I know you mentioned earlier that you're a guy that, you know, digs quotes and everything else, but there's plenty of historical figures that have said destruction doesn't come from without, it comes from within. The Roman Empire is a perfect example. You know, it was prophesied years in advance that your enemy isn't going to come from outside your gates. It's going to come from inside your own, you know, political military systems. And I see it playing out before our eyes.
That's something to really think about. I think everyone should think about that and apply it, shrink that down into how that affects your own life. Or it could just be you, right? How often are we self-destructive? Veterans, right? It's our number one enemy post-service is ourselves. That's guaranteed. Yeah. Okay. We could go on that and talk about that probably all day. But I want to get back on track here with what's going on. So you're riding on Tuesday across the country. What can you in a perfect scenario, what's the outcome in this case?
The reason behind it, the perfect outcome would be these three guys get exonerated, get reinstated. They have their special duty pays, you know, reinstated, and their security clearances. I would love a public apology. Be like, hey, we messed up. It was wrong, and we're going to fix it and just get back on track with life, right? That's a best case scenario as far as the mission goes. On a day-to-day scenario for me, just riding logistically to go down that route, perfect would be no flat tires, no car wrecks, no catastrophic, you know, failures of the bike, obviously. But that's kind of the two levels of that I see. You know, it's twofold. The first mission is to raise awareness and get their story out there. The second, I have to remind myself, is it's not a race. The point's just to get across the country. No one's holding me to a timeline. I gave myself the timeline of 40 days, which right now is more than doable. But if that date isn't reached, it's not the end of the world. I don't think anyone's going to hold a gun to my head. I mean, who knows? So,
and when you get there, what are you going to do?
So the end point right now is Wilmington, North Carolina, and that's still getting worked on, just kind of as far as the purpose behind it. I'm not a big public affairs person. Like, let's make a big deal about stuff. I'll be content to drink a beer, you know, with the guys and say, hey, we did it. And hopefully at that point, it's generated enough awareness where the rest of everyone else can run with it, right, and get their story out there and get it going more. And that end state's reached. That being said, we're still kind of in the works, you know, of maybe, you know, meeting at a pier in Wilmington and then, hey, ride the last X amount of miles to, you know, a local bar. If at that point things are open back up again, you know, enough because the whole COVID stuff going on.
Sure. You know, from this whole thing, I hope there's a way to follow along with you on this ride. Are there going to be updates?
Yeah, so if you go to uap.org, and I think right now the website is just /coast to coast, and that should bring you to the page, or you can just Google search United American Patriots Coast to Coast or Raider Ride 2020. And I'll actually be carrying a live GPS tracker with me. So it updates every 2 to 5 minutes with movement. So as I travel along from, you know, leg to leg, people will be able to click on that link and actually see physically where I'm at. There's also, just because of everything going on, people can go onto that website and, you know, pledge to virtually ride. So, hey, I'm going to ride 20 miles today, you know, in support of this and these guys. And so people can, you know, pledge that. There's also, it's a one-stop shop. So if you haven't written your congressman, you know, you can go on that and and there's links that you don't even have to do the research. You know, just type in where you're at, and it'll give you a draft on, hey, this is something you could write to them and who it's going to go to and how to get it to them. So that web page specifically will be kind of the one-stop shop for everything.
You know, here's what I think about this, and what I apply this to everything that I see in the news or politically, or, you know, military culture and anything that I hear about, right? Which, this is what I want people to do. I don't want you to make a decision about this. I want you to make yourself aware, right? So I never want anyone to rush to judgment on anything, but I want people to go out and find out as much information as they can, right? Educate yourself. And I apply that to everything. Like, are you voting? Have you read anything about what you're voting for? Are you a headline news person where you pass judgment off a headline? Or do you read an article and then a counter article and then every other article that you can find and get as much information as possible? It's like if somebody told me the earth was flat and then I was like, cool, the earth's flat, you know? Or I might go fucking read a book, you know? Yeah. And then find out that there's quite a bit of other information out there. So the website uap.org has pretty much up to date current history and information about this case. That's right?
Yep.
And
that's correct.
And people will be able to follow along with you. So coast to coast, uap.org/coast to coast. And you're going to be tracking this ride the whole way.
Yep. Yeah. And if people obviously want to come out and ride, I'm not going to say no. If people want to see where I'm at and want to come out, obviously my communications are going to be limited as I'm out there. But UAP is kind of handling all that from their end. So,
have you been in touch with these guys, the three?
Yes.
They know what you're doing?
Yep.
Are they free right now? Are they living at home? Are they incarcerated?
No, they're free. Obviously, until a verdict is passed, you know, they're in limbo. And I think that's just kind of the messed up thing is, like, your entire, you know, all of them were very close to retirement, you know, within several years. So here you have, you know, decades of service, and now you're in limbo and you have no idea what your fate is. But they can't go to work. They can't go to the command. So again, it's like standing by for a year and a half, and the fate of, am I gonna be cleared of this? Am I gonna have a dishonorable discharge and lose everything? Am I gonna lose my family and spend time in prison in Leavenworth? I almost think that that's worse, you know, than just, hey, this is what's happening and you move on with life. But the command is, and I won't say it's intentional. I believe it's intentional, but they purposely stalled. You know, they're purposely delaying this case. I have high hopes for this new general coming in, General Glynn, that he does what's right. If General Yu doesn't before he leaves, which the way it looks, he's not. But, you know, I'd offer that personal message to General Glynn right now. If he ever listens to this and say, hey, sir, like, you have the chance to do what's right and to stand beside your men, which is what your whole position is there for. So, you know, the ball's in their court at that point. So, but
Aaron, so we're coming up on an hour here, so we'll get to some final thoughts, which is, for me, thank you for what you're doing. You're a man of honor. It's obvious. You walk the walk and you ride the ride, so to speak, because you're about to step off on this journey. And I guarantee I'll be following along with you the whole way and posting updates any way I can help spread information, because I feel like this is one that the veteran community could really rally behind if they get the information to them. I hope that I enjoyed this conversation. I feel like we got to a lot of good points and some good ideas. Is there anything you want to add here?
No, not really. I mean, just same here. I'm just thankful to be here. This is all for these guys and all about, you know, their families, and just hoping to accomplish what we're setting out to accomplish. But I just want to say thank you, you know, to you and your listeners and everyone else for taking the time.
Thanks. Thank you. So uap.org and uap.org/coast to coast. And we're gonna track along this ride, or we're gonna track the case, and hopefully sooner than later, maybe as soon as a month from now, right? This whole thing could be resolved and get to the bottom of it. The information is out there that you can find. You can Google it. I'll post a link to the SoftRep article onto my Instagram, and in the description of this podcast, wherever you're listening to it, you'll find a link there, and as well as the press release that I got from you. If it's okay, I'll share that.
Totally.
And this is I'm excited for potentially what you're going to accomplish with this. I hope it's the positive outcome that we all hope for. And then what we'll do is maybe when you get over there to North Carolina, we can reconnect with you and see what's been happening, or maybe halfway or something.
Yeah, all good. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Aaron.
Cool. Thanks, Max. Appreciate you.